So today, welcome to the world of Wii U.
The Wii U was an oddball of a console. It's got some value where it counts, a handful of decent games, the still operational Virtual Console, and some quirks. But as a consumer product trying to break through to the mainstream, it tanked. This machine comes during what can now be seen in retrospect as a transitional period of Nintendo's modern history. The Wii U suffered from a severe case of identity crisis. Nintendo's prior console, Wii, was a monumental success, as everyone who lived it knows. But that comes with a caveat. The Wii wasn't quite a success in the same way other video game consoles were, where consistent support from game developers and frequent system overhauls allowed a console to retain its value for close to 10 years on average. The Wii was more like a hot toy with one cool trick, the trick being Wii Sports. If you're a video game enthusiast and only had a Wii during its lifespan, it was slim pickings. Sure, Nintendo supported the console with its own first-party offerings, but these were too few and far between. Despite this, the Wii brand was still very strong with a casual crowd, while its appeal was quickly fading with more traditional video game consumers. As Nintendo started to lose its grip on the casuals, the Wii relevancy dwindling, it was time for a refreshing new product. Enter the Wii U. The Wii brand was so strong from Nintendo's perspective, they couldn't bear letting go of it. Sure, I can understand that. Money talks. But if you don't want to confuse the casual consumers you are trying so desperately to hold on to, call it the Wii 2 or something like that. This is where the confusion began. To make matters worse, promotional material would hardly highlight the physical console itself, instead focusing just on its main gimmick, the controller. Consumers would think the gamepad was just an accessory to the Wii, not realizing it was actually a whole new piece of hardware. But it's not just confusion that ultimately created this identity crisis. Nintendo themselves were trying to re-appeal to the hardcore crowd. These are the people who probably had GameCubes who have since moved on to Xboxes or PlayStations during the Wii era. At the same time, Nintendo also wanted to keep chasing the non-gamers, while failing to see that the world has changed since the Wii DS era. The Blue Ocean strategy was no longer a path to success. It's this confusing marketing, as well as many other factors that hurt the Wii U. The Wii U's messaging aside, the gamepad, the console's main selling point, does offer some unique experiences and is quite versatile, I might add. This was when second screen experiences were becoming a trend in the tech industry, also seen with devices like tablets and smartphones. The Wii U was primarily built around this appeal. At the launch of the Wii U, Ubisoft would take another crack at releasing an exclusive, successful launch game for a Nintendo console, having failed previously with Red Steel on the Wii. There were some indicators, but no one knew for sure if the Wii U would flop. Given the sales numbers of the Wii, it was too potentially lucrative to not take a chance. Where did the Wii U fit in my life personally, as a Nintendo fan? Well, unlike the beginning of the Wii's life, in which it fit in perfectly, the Wii U was mostly an afterthought for me. At 21 years old, I had just moved to the city. I still followed the industry and Nintendo closely, but otherwise was far too busy with college, racking up a high score student debt, and focusing on personal relationships to really make purchasing a new console my top priority. A console which didn't really excite me to begin with. A few years in though, I still wanted a Wii U for myself. This was Nintendo's first high-definition machine after all. I wanted Mario in 1080p. So being on the budget of a poor student living in a shabby basement apartment, I picked up a used unit off Kijiji.
What are you buying?
And I had my fun with it. It certainly didn't win me over the way the GameCube did, but it had its moments of glory. One of the first games I wanted to try out was, of course, ZombiU. Third-party exclusives on Nintendo consoles have a strange appeal to me. ZombiU, much like Red Steel, is a game that is trying to take full advantage of Nintendo's quirky new hardware. Firstly, the main premise of ZombiU, a first-person survival shooter based in a London, England infested with zombies. It's very clearly inspired by 28 Days Later and maybe Shaun of the Dead too. You're being fed information by this faceless voice known as the Prepper. The Prepper essentially strings the story along and tells you what to do next.
If you're going in, be careful. Ron Friedman is a lying sack of shite. Don't believe a word he says. He'll send you off on some wild goose chase.
It's all fairly generic, aside from the game's two main gimmicks. One, permadeath. Sorta.
There goes another one.
ZombiU came out at a time when, prior to the trend of battle royales, the in vogue genre was survival games with a permadeath mechanic. Die in the game and lose everything you gained, only to start again with just the clothes on your back. I actually enjoy this genre quite a bit. The constant threat of permadeath creates a ceaseless tension and naturally dictates the pace of the game. However, it doesn't quite work in ZombiU. It's actually just annoying. Because unlike ZombiU, those other survival games are typically open world and shared with many other real human players. The potential risk of real players killing you and stealing your items is what gives those games its allure. ZombiU is not an open world. Well, it's open in the sense that yes, you can travel to any of these closed-off segments of the game at any point, but the game has a very clear linear progression, which doesn't really mix well with a permadeath mechanic. Also, in ZombiU, there are only enemy zombies, no human opponents. If a zombie does kill you, you lose all the items you had on you, including firearms which can only be found once in key areas. Once you die, you spawn as a new survivor, which really doesn't make sense within a story. Everyone acts as if you're the same person. You do have a chance to regain your lost items from the previous now zombie survivor, but if you fuck that up, that's it. Those items are lost forever. There's a storage crate in your safe house where you can store items either to free space in your own backpack or save some gear for the next survivor just in case. This might sound fun on paper, as if it'll add a layer of fear and tension to the horror elements, but it's really just a bore. Especially because in between each rather generic area is brutal loading times. Seriously, after a while, I just use these loading times as a break to charge my gamepad. It's clear they try to offset it by having these winding corridors for you to walk through while the game loads in the background, but I always make it to the door while it still needs to load. So retreading your steps with basically no items in hand to retrieve your gear just feels like a chore. Less than a survival game, it feels like it's trying to be more akin to something like Dead Rising. The game is short, and getting through it should be some kind of endurance run. Except, Dead Rising is fun. As mentioned, there are two main gimmicks ZombiU employs. The second one is how the gamepad is used. The majority of Wii U games utilize the gamepad by just throwing a map and the heads-up display on screen. I don't mind that. I like a nice clean view, free of too many HUD elements. ZombiU takes this a step further by having almost every contextual action done on the gamepad, most notably looting and accessing your inventory. It's a cool idea, especially for a survival horror game. Filing through a cabinet or your inventory while the game still runs in real time is a good mix for survival horror. The idea is that you're suddenly vulnerable, while the television screen shows a third-person view of your player, potential zombies nearby. But so long as you always take care of the enemies in a room prior to looting, using a keypad, or opening up your inventory, you'll be safe. It's very rare you are ever snuck up on, except in some scripted sequences. There really isn't much more to say about the campaign. Worth noting though, that early development, this game was going to be a very different title. Ubisoft initially presented its Wii U game as Killer Freaks from Outer Space, the enemies being a parody of Ubisoft's Rabbids, which are essentially video games minions. You can see familiar aspects of ZombiU here, the London setting, dark environment, but the tone seemed much farther from what ZombiU delivered. Who knows if this concept would have made a bigger impact than ZombiU. It would have been less generic at the very least. You can find little Easter eggs spotted throughout the campaign. I'm not trying to do a full review of ZombiU here. I could talk about every aspect of the game, its Demon Souls-inspired online interaction, how its weapons feel, the story, the overall presentation, but there's really no value in that. Where there is value, however, is the multiplayer. The multiplayer is so unique, and dare I say, fun, that it's worth picking up a copy of the game for. It makes fantastic use of the gamepad. While the gamepad mechanics on the single-player campaign could easily be translated to a normal non-Wii U game, the way in which the multiplayer takes advantage of it feels like it can only be achieved on the Wii U alone. Here's how it works. It's only 2 players, competing against one another, but each player has a very different role, and you'll need a Wii U Pro controller. I have 3 for some reason, so hit me up if you need one. The player using the traditional Pro controller, the survivor, plays the game as if it is any standard first-person shooter. Choose your loadout, grab pickups throughout the map like ammo, turrets, health, power-ups. The player using the gamepad, the king of zombies, plays the match as if it were a tower defense game. Overhead view of the map, placing zombies throughout to try and thwart the survivor, over the course of time leveling up, acquiring upgrades, and new zombie types. The objective of both players is to capture all the flags. The survivor captures flags by remaining in the specified radius without intrusion. Zombie King captures a flag by having specific flag capturing zombies surround the pool. There's plenty of room for strategy for both players the longer you play, between several zombie types and different loadouts, 5 maps, 2 difficulty settings, and choosing the winning flag count to be either 4 or 5. There is enough variety here for a great night of fun between 2 pals. You might have a friend who doesn't really enjoy first-person shooters, but would love the tower defense role, or vice versa. Even better if you both excel at either role. As expected, this multiplayer is local only, and it's probably better that way. Had it been online as well, it's likely that there would be some surefire winning strategy that would be quickly exploited. Oh, and worth noting, you can even use a Wii remote and nunchuck in place of the Wii U Pro controller for that authentic red steel throwback. It may take a moment to adjust to the controls, but in time you'll be popping zombie heads and legs with pinpoint accuracy. I personally haven't seen anything quite like this anywhere else, so if you know of any games like it, please let me know. I do remember upon first seeing the reveal trailer for the Resident Evil spin-off, Resistance, it immediately reminded me of ZombieU's Multiplayer, but personally have never tried it, and critically it doesn't seem well received. So ZombiU was actually later ported to the PC and other contemporary consoles. Dropping the U from the title, it now has the very original title of Zombie. When I decided to make this video, I got very curious about how the game would translate without the gamepad functions. I bought it on Steam, attempted to boot it up. The game crashes upon opening every time, and the only way I could fix it was by disconnecting from the internet. Anyway, the first thing I had to say about the port, no multiplayer. See? I told you, it can only be done faithfully on the Wii U. Although I would have liked to see it, it probably would have given a mode more exposure. It's surreal playing this game on my much more powerful PC as opposed to the Wii U. Seeing this game running at 60 frames, minimal load times, high resolution, controlling with a mouse and keyboard, it doesn't even feel like the same game anymore. The map is now on screen. This feels much better, and way less tiring than looking up and down every few seconds. The rest of the gamepad contextual actions just happen on screen. The scanning tool is now just a button press. Look how quickly I'm scanning all this shit. They even made some updates to the core game itself. The flashlight now has 2 settings, and defeating enemies with your cricket bat takes far fewer hits than before. That really dragged the game down in a Wii U version. So, is the game more fun like this? I don't know. I think so, but it clearly lost something along the way. I wonder if the limited mobility of aiming with the analog sticks, the frame rate of 30 frames per second, and slower pacing of the Wii U version made it a little scarier. Because now I feel unstoppable, rushing through these areas nailing headshots like it's nothing. Unlike the last video with Red Steel, I would actually recommend ZombiU, but only for that great local multiplayer alone. Nothing more. Man, had I been a teenager instead of being in the middle of college when I discovered a multiplayer mode like this, I know I would have put a ton of time into something like this with friends. If you made it through this, thanks for watching. I got amazing feedback on my last video about Red Steel. It really motivates me to make more fun, long-form videos like this. This is only my 3rd video, and I'm uploading these at a snail's pace right now. They take a while to put together, especially with a full-time job. But as an editor, I love the process. I haven't self-promoted myself much yet. I want to have a nice catalog of videos before I start to do so. But if you did like this video, then don't forget to have a great day.